Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099 and I am here to do not quite a rant. I mean, there's definitely an undercurrent of ranting that you will hear in this video. I want to say this is more similar to my Missed Opportunities videos, where I talk about specific plot and story details of movies, books, and TV shows, except that I won't be talking about plot here. I will be saying this is what I would do differently while ranting about what is currently being done. As for the topic of this video, it is the X-Men comic book franchise. For those who may not be keeping up with my channel, I am a ginormous X-Men fan. I've been so since I was in kindergarten, and even though I don't read the single issues of comic books anymore, I have been making it my mission for quite a while now to own every X-Men graphic novel and trade paperback in existence. And in doing so, I've noticed many things about this franchise that I think could be handled better, and that's what I'll be talking about here. If you remember, over a month ago, I did a video pitching what I would do with Marvel's Exile series. At the time, I mentioned that that video was originally part of a different video that you guys would see later. Well, it's over a month later, but this was what that video was supposed to be part of before I realized that it warranted its own thing. You may disagree, LOL, ROTFL. So anyway, here we go. 4 things I would do differently if I was in charge of the X-Men comic book franchise. It was 4 before that Exiles thing got its own video, then it was 3, then I realized that I had another thing, so it's 4. Number 1. Fewer X-Men titles. I looked up all of the X-Men related books in the recent Marvel solicitations. There are 21 X-Men related titles coming out in November of 2013. 6 air quotes core X-Men books, 3 Wolverine titles, and then everything else doesn't really fit as either of those things. Cut it down to 3 core X-Men titles. Any character with a solo book like Deadpool or Wolverine only has 1 solo book, and then any other satellite book like X-Factor or X-Force can exist. I get that a franchise will exist in the first place because more money can be made than if one single comic is coming out. But there is a difference in expanding the brand and flooding the market needlessly, and I feel like 21 X-Men titles is definitely the latter. Number 2. Fewer X-Men crossovers. This is twofold. 1. The creators working at Marvel and DC were mostly fans at one point, so they should remember this, but when you work at these corporations, you get comic books for free. So I feel that these creators who try to shove so many of these large crossovers and company-wide events down our throats don't really understand that these things are not cheap for the fans. Or maybe they do understand. After all, they wouldn't do these things if they didn't get a boatload of money when they did. But we the fans are not made of money. When I was buying single issues, I did not enjoy being forced to buy every X-Men title for 3 or 4 months if a crossover was happening. I only really enjoyed 1 or 2 of the X-Men titles, but during Endangered Species, Messiah Complex, and any other crossover that exists to drain our pockets, I felt obligated to buy everything just so that the story would make some kind of sense. If it was up to me, this would stop. I'm not saying that they would completely go away, but they would definitely be slowed down tremendously. The year I stopped reading single issues was largely because my local comic book shop closed down. But I had been attempting to stop reading single issues for a while, and you would think the closure of my local comic book shop would have been the single thing that made this choice the easiest, but it was not. It was, I poo you not, 3 big X-Men events all happening back to back to back in the same year. Messiah War happened in Cable and X-Force, which you might say was not even that important, and in a way it wasn't. But Marvel definitely wanted us to think it was. I distinctly remember hearing one of the higher-ups in Marvel say that this story was crucial, and that anyone thinking of skipping it should think twice. Even though, at the end of the day, all of the characters were back in the same place that they were when that story started. So if you were fooled by Marvel into thinking that it was a crossover that you should read to understand what was going on, then you went immediately into Necrosha. Now, Necrosha was really just an X-Force story. Its roots were in X-Force. Everything in that story that was actually crucial to the story happened in X-Force. But Marvel still tried to treat it like a crossover. You had Necrosha-related stuff going on in New Mutants and X-Men Legacy, even though the actual meat of the story was not spilling into those books. So I would say this one isn't even a crossover. It was probably conceived as a normal story arc in X-Force, and then editors forced other books where they could to become part of this X-Force storyline. And then we go right into Second Coming, which was a crossover in every sense of the word. And these crossovers do not give the audience a single moment to breathe. That is really the issue here. I actually prefer reading runs of creators when the creators are allowed to tell the stories that they want to tell without interruption from on high. I understand that editors are necessary at times, but when you get a crossover and then scarcely 2 story arcs happen before another freaking crossover comes by, I get the feeling that editors are no longer editing, but are just shoving their own ideas into the series, and the writers and artists are forced to bring these stories to life. I wouldn't mind these crossovers if they happen once every 3 to 5 years. That would give the creators of each title plenty of time to tell the stories they want to tell. You know, the job they were allegedly hired for. And whenever we do get a crossover, it would feel much more special because this kind of thing does not happen every other day. Number 3. More distinct settings for each title. From what little I've seen of the current X-Men books, they've been doing a better job of this than they were when I stopped reading. What I mean here is that if we are going to get another X-Men title added to the pile, then there needs to be a reason why we are getting it beyond, well, it makes us money. For instance, if Wolverine and the X-Men is your series where Wolverine trains the students at the Grey Academy, and the adjectiveless X-Men is the adult X-Men allied with Wolverine going on missions, then there is no reason in Hades to add yet another X-Men book in the form of Amazing X-Men, which apparently Amazing X-Men is not much different than adjectiveless except that there are a few dudes on that team. It's still the same thing. X-Men on Team Wolverine going out on missions and doing stuff. Right now, in the post-AVX world where 1/5 of the X-Men are hated by the rest of the team, there should maybe be 4 books. One book focusing on Cyclops' Weapon X-Men, one book focusing on the X-Men who are loyal to Wolverine, one book focusing on the students at Wolverine's school, and then if you need it, another book focusing on the students at Cyclops' school. But I would say you wouldn't even need that last one, since nobody that I am aware of seems to actually care about Bendis' New Mutants like Goldballs and his pals. Right now we have 2 books featuring students at Wolverine's school, apparently 2 books featuring teams allied with Wolverine's school, and then however many Wolverine books that we need, and then Uncanny X-Men for Cyclops' Renegade team. Now, like I said, they're doing better now than they were when I stopped reading comics around 2010. Right around the time of Second Coming, when I finally stopped reading single issues, it seemed like an arc of Astonishing X-Men might as well happen in Uncanny X-Men or the new adjectiveless X-Men title that came out after Second Coming, because those books are the same thing with different titles. So I guess things could be worse, but it still doesn't feel like they're completely getting the hint. If a book exists, it needs to have a different mission statement than the other books. And if it's too similar, then axe it. Remember, at the turn of the millennium, Joe Quesada canceled something like 1/3 of the X-Men books that had decent sales, all because he allegedly felt that they were superfluous. While I know Quesada is no longer in the same position now that he was then, he was the editor-in-chief when Second Coming was going on, and having 15 different X-Men books didn't seem like a bad idea at the time. So, hypocrisy. Yeah, bad idea. My final edict I would issue if I was in charge may seem like a contradiction. My favorite era of the X-Men was when Chris Claremont was essentially the patriarch of the franchise. He was writing Uncanny X-Men for 16 years. He wrote New Mutants for half of its first run, and he wrote Excalibur at least until he left Marvel altogether in the early 90s. And I feel like one mastermind behind the entire franchise was what made so much of that era fantastic. Yes, I know there were others working on the X books around this time, like John Byrne on Alpha Flight, Louise Simonson on the New Mutants, and Bob Layton on X Factor. But for the most part, it was Chris Claremont who turned the X-Men from a single title that nobody cared about into a money-making franchise that became a corner of the Marvel Universe. So, what's my point? My point is, even though I rank the Claremont era of X-Men comics as some of my favorite comics of all time, I just don't see Marvel allowing any one writer control of the whole franchise like that. So if it was up to me, I would have each writer on one book. So Brian Michael Bendis does not get 2 titles. Jason Aaron does not get 2 titles. They each get 1 title. Bendis actually planned for Uncanny X-Men and All New X-Men to read together, so he might as well have just combined those 2 titles into a weekly series with rotating art teams. This way, we don't get the distinct impression that Marvel somehow values Bendis and Aaron over Brian Wood or Simon Spurrier, who both have half as many titles as Aaron and Bendis. And this way, again, it allows for each writer to do their own thing in their own little corner of the X-Men world. As long as the fewer crossovers rule is being followed, then each writer won't be worried about what the other writers are doing in their own titles. And I think all of this would make for much better comics for the fans. And at least for me, it wouldn't boil my blood so much when I want to read a comic by this one guy, but I can't because I have to read this other story first. And then I have to read these crossovers, and then I might as well just not have any money at all, ever, if I want to read X-Men comics. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and maybe you agreed with what I said, or maybe you didn't. If you did, I encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to see more videos from me, I will be back tomorrow with a different kind of video. Until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.